Hello, Paul.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I am Mark Shapiro, Artistic Director of the Chamber Chorus Cantori, New York, and I am with composer Paul Stanhope. The reason who is in, where are you now?
In Sydney.
He is in Sydney, which is in Australia. And we had quite a time figuring out when we could meet. It's 11 p.m. in New York, and what time is it for you?
Just after 1 p.m. in Australia.
Lucky. Perfect for you, right? Okay.
Perfect for me, yes.
So the reason we are together is that Cantori New York is going to give the US premiere and the New York premiere of Paul's Requiem. Those concerts will be on Friday, November 14th and Saturday, November 15th at 8 p.m. at Church of the Holy Apostles on Ninth Avenue at 28th Street. So Paul has agreed to sort of set the table for us, tell us a bit about the piece, how it came to be. I will start by saying, I just mentioned to Paul before we started recording, the group loves this piece. Um, I came upon it in the most honest way possible. That is, Paul sent it to me, the score in an email, and I opened it and thought, wow, this is really a hot piece. Sometimes the score just hits you, and I just thought it was really a stunner. And my judgment has been borne out. The group loves it. The soloists, when they've encountered it, have loved it. Our accompanists have loved it. So, Paul, tell us how you came to write this piece and when.
Yeah, the story of this piece actually is quite a long journey, and in fact, it stretches back. I mean, the process of it actually stretched over about 20 years of composition. And that wasn't a deliberate act. It was the fact that I had a few little nuggets of a piece which I thought might add up one day to a requiem. So some of the earliest music stretches back to 1999.
Oh,
Yeah, I know, and then it includes the Lux Eterna, actually is the oldest piece, which is the second last movement in the Requiem. And then in 2016, I wrote the Agnus Dei, thinking that those two would actually work as a pair. And Lux Eterna was originally an unaccompanied piece, and Agnus Dei has stayed an unaccompanied piece. Um, and then there is a cycle of three songs of this wonderful Aboriginal poet, Ujuru Nunakal, who has written texts about mourning, and they're quite philosophical, but also they lean into her particular indigenous culture. And they were from the sort of turn of the 20th century as well. It just hadn't occurred to me to actually put the things together. Um, then it kind of was around 2018, 2019 when Sydney Chamber Choir asked me for a big piece and what I'd like to do. And in sitting down to think about that, I was thinking, perhaps the Agnus Dei and Lux Eterna could provide something of a kernel and for me to start weaving other movements around that. And at that point, I kind of realized, oh, actually, there's actually some harmonic world sharing between the songs that I'd written and the Lux Eterna because they're around the same time. And then it was a matter of writing movements, new movements around that and trying to make the worlds knit up and the key signatures knit up. So it was quite nice actually to have some of those pre-existing things for me to then, create this much larger arc.
is there anything you can say when you mention harmonic world, more specifically what you mean?
Yeah, okay, so there is a kind of language that I have in my choral music in general, which leans into polychords. So they're usually two quite tonal chords when mapped onto each other, create this quite colorful, sometimes quite a dissonant effect, and then sometimes more open. And there's a feeling of tension and flow from that. So I kind of use those principles then across the piece as a whole, but it actually has leaked quite a lot into my general choral style, which I had sort of established when I was in my early 30s.
And do you think that's because you like the way it rings in the chorus particularly, or there's something about this harmonic language that expressively, or all of the above?
Yeah, I think it is actually all of the above. That if you get partials that really map together in a nice way in a choir, it sounds like nothing else. When those tones ring together, and you can do quite colorful chords I've found over the years by using these principles of quite open gaps at the bottom and then smaller intervals up the top and then combining different chords. And then there's this interesting world then when one chord resolves to another chord and how you might go for quite open chords when you need the loudest the loudest element, when you want to go to a bright A major for a climax. And similarly, there are ways of doing some quite low, closely voiced chords that can sound very soft and shimmery. So all of this comes from my practice as a choral director as well. I was musical director of Sydney Chamber Choir, which is the group that commissioned this piece from 2006 through to 2015. And I'd done quite a lot of freelance conducting before that. So, and singing in a choir as well. So all of these things kind of really added up to the development of the language that you hear in the Requiem.
It's fascinating. I think we do a lot of new pieces of one kind and another, and it is not so universal that everybody writes as well as you do for the instrument, meaning not only an individual voice, but for the choral instrument as an aggregate instrument. So you must have a lot of experience, as you said, as a conductor and singer, and also a real affin I think you really like it.
I do really like it. That's right. I get a real buzz, from standing out in front of a choir and those partials really locking in on getting these colorful effects out of the choir. And I really kind of had quite specific voices in mind when I was writing it. But fortunately, that seems to kind of, if it works for one good group, it then will work for another because I've had this piece performed by two other groups in Australia. So very much looking forward to hearing what Cantori does with it.
I think we are too. Talk to us a bit about the instrumentation that you landed on and
Hmm.
why, what it is and why.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? So um, I've gone for a group of four woodwinds, a harp, and percussion. You might think that harp is quite an obvious choice for a requiem, and it actually does work very well for voices in general. I think Benjamin Britten worked that out pretty well. So the reason the woodwinds are in there is because of the set of songs that are forming these solo movements in the Requiem, and they were originally commissioned by a group called the Southern Cross Soloists in Queensland, which is a northern state in Australia. And so there were four woodwind players and a piano, and then they brought in a soprano voice as well. So that was there in existence, and I thought I would just continue using those same forces. And instead of having a piano, because not every church, not every performing venue has a good piano,
Right.
and I quite like the idea of having harp and percussion as a way of doing the sort of creating the sonorities of what you can do with the piano. But there's something actually very unique about those two sounds together. And I just really like the idea of perhaps the choir being its own string section, and don't need a string section when you've got these beautiful woodwind sonorities to act kind of like the solos if you were thinking of things in orchestration terms. And I mean, I think it's a quite colorful effect, and I'm happy with the experiment, really.
Yeah. I think it's a very unusual combination, but I think it's going to work. Obviously, you've done it, so you know it works, but it feels like it's going to work really well. Um, and talk to us, did you write it for the solos for specific people or specific voice types, or how was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I had a kind of English tenor voice in my head, and fortunately worked with this amazing tenor in Sydney named Richard Butler, and he kind of went through that English cathedral training, sang in choirs in Oxford, I believe, and then the cathedral tradition in London. And then he moved out to Australia and has had quite an interesting career as someone who might do, say, the evangelist part in Bach Passions.
Hmm.
And so he's that lovely high flexible voice that I was after.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the soprano, I mean Chloe Lancashire, who did the premiere and is on the recording, is just for me the perfect bell-like soprano voice who can do Baroque music, who can do contemporary music, and slot within. She's got a lot of choral experience. She's now working with the Norddeutsche Rundfunk chorus in Germany as a professional. But I was very lucky to get her for this piece. So yeah, I did have these quite specific sounds in my head.
I'm interested in the question of the length of the Requiem. It's about 45 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
And as a
Yeah.
composer, can you speak to, have you written a lot of pieces that are that long? And what are the particular challenges in dealing with that span of time?
Yeah, no, it is a particular kind of thing, and I think Requiem has its own pacing. I think traditionally it comes out quite fiery at the start and then kind of sort of ekes out, sort of dissipates. And there's something like that with this structure as well. It's quite an energetic Sanctus movement, for example. And then after that, it kind of although there are ebbs and flows, it sort of does the same kind of ethereal drifting off into eternity is kind of how I like to think of a requiem form. But yeah, I've done a number of pieces of this length, and I've done a big dramatic cantata, which is 65 minutes length with large forces. Did another one which has just been done recently in Western Australia for symphony chorus, orchestra, and two soloists.
Wow.
So you find these shapes, and I think a way of working with a long form where you need to kind of dot themes and motifs and ways of working throughout a larger structure. And its own particular skill to develop that, and it does take a bit of practice. So, I mean, one of the rules that I set for myself, and I hope I've achieved it, was no bad movements, no boring movements. So everything needs to be as high quality as the other movement.
Yeah, I think definitely there's no chaff. Um,
Glad
yeah. Uh, and one also feels going through the piece that you really immersed in, for want of a better word, the musical heritage and tradition and just the language of your ancestors, of one kind and another. And I wonder if there are particular strains of that you feel are present in your work more than others.
That's a really nice way of expressing that. Thanks, Mark. And very thoughtful too. So I think ancestors, we can look at the ancestors of Ujuru, for example, the her line of indigenous people. And what I've tried to do is think about what does it mean to have a requiem in contemporary Australia? What things can we bring in and can we learn? And it seemed to me that one of the best things would be to listen to our elders and to kind of learn from their wisdom and their insight. And so I think Ujuru's poetry does that in spades. And then there's another form of ancestry, and that is Western culture as well, and all the traditions of Requiem, for example, and sacred music that flow through all the composers who have written Requiems, and I've taken sort of yeah, I guess key elements from Benjamin Britten, from Fauré, from Brahms, who have all had their very unique view of the Requiem and how to kind of bring a real sense of a personal voice to it. And one of my strategies was, like Benjamin Britten, to put in a secular poetry in there. And I was hoping that the secular poetry would help elucidate and perhaps offset and also to an extent replace some of the liturgical movements to get moments of contemplation and for people, I think, to really reach back through that tradition of sacred music and find something that's meaningful for them.
So, thank you. So interesting. I think you've mentioned somewhere that the piece emerged during the pandemic or in association with
Hmm.
the pandemic, or I think, as I said, we do a lot of new pieces, and sometimes something strikes you that there's just a lot of heart in it. And
Hmm.
I don't think it's the piece is in any way mawkish or superficial. It has none of that, but it's a cliche to say it, but it's very deeply felt. Somehow it exudes that. And I wonder, do you think that is something to do with the pandemic or something else, or what do you think?
It was being finished up certainly through at first stage of pandemic in Australia in 2020, and then we had a rather odd experience of doing quite well at first and sort of eliminating the virus, and then seeming to get on with it, and then it struck us again. Um, so it was in a couple of stages. The premiere was originally planned for 2020, and then we went into lockdown. We did quite well as a country in that phase. Being an isolated island sometimes helps.
Yes. Mhm.
Um, and so in 2021, it was premiere, and that was during a reprieve where we'd actually temporarily eliminated the virus, and everyone was going back to concerts and things like that. Even though we needed to have, we had a lot of precautions going on, and that rehearsal process was really testing actually because because of the restrictions put on us. Everyone had to be 4 square meters apart from each other. On stage, we needed, two stage extensions to get everybody separate enough from each other. There was a kind of a sense of real determination to make this thing work despite these terrible odds. Um, so it's interesting because most of the material was actually completed before,
Right.
we went into any form of lockdown. But I think maybe there was something to do with that premiere and the attention that it got that kind of chimed to the times somehow.
Yes. It certainly feels very resonant. I don't think we think of it particularly as we're preparing it as I think we're all ready to let the bygones be bygones where pandemic is concerned, but it is very moving piece and it does all the things you want a requiem to do, where you feel very consoled and inspired and moved and you kind of invested in life. So I think it works very beautifully. As we wrap up, is there anything else you'd want to say to a New York audience or the chorus itself?
Well, if you're interested in listening to the piece beforehand, there is a recording out on Spotify.
Mhm.
But there's really nothing like hearing live music in itself and hearing in a beautiful acoustic. So I just urge everyone to get along to hear this fantastic choir, and I hope they all appreciate the piece.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'll just stop the recording and I'll come back.